back to School of the Rock. It's me, Sandra, and I'm so glad you're joining me again this week for another episode in our Slimed series. Over the past 5 weeks already, we have been looking at stories about Jacob to see how God helped him through some pretty slimy situations. We'll be jumping into another story about Jacob, but first, I wanted to show you some new slime that I made just yesterday. I made it quickly and then stuck it in this container with a lid because we know how important it is to keep it all sealed up, right? So it doesn't dry out. Well, I decided to mix things up a little bit, so I made pink slime. Can you see? Isn't that a nice color? Yeah, well, let's take a look at this slime. Wait a minute, what is going on here? It's as hard as a rock and it feels cold. What's this note on the back?
Dear Mom, I saw that you left the homemade ice cream out on the counter last night, so I put it back in the freezer for you. Love, Sam.
Oh no. My son thought that the slime was ice cream, so he put it in the freezer. I mean, I get that it looks like the ice cream that I recently made. I made some homemade strawberry ice cream and it was very similar to this color. But this wasn't ice cream, this was slime, and now it's all hard and it's tough. You can't squish it at all. And then when I was leaving this morning, I asked my daughter to grab me the container with the red lid for me, and I didn't realize that she had to get it out of the freezer. Now I can't show you what I wanted to do with my slime. But you know, there might be a lesson for us in this after all. You know, slime is no good when it gets hard like this. It's all tough and hard, right? You can't stretch it out at all. But the opposite is true when it comes to our faith. God doesn't want us to have a gooey, slimy faith. He wants us to have a strong faith, like my frozen slime. He wants us to cling on to Jesus no matter what happens. He wants us to persevere through trials and challenges. The more we persevere, the stronger we'll become. So what does persevere mean? Well, I have some pictures to show you that I think might help us to understand. Earlier in the spring, a grackle, which is a type of blackbird, started to build a nest on top of a bend in the east trough just below the overhang of my roof. Once it was partially built, the wind blew it down. This happened not once, but 3 times. And here's a picture of the partially finished nest that blew down to the ground every time. Even though the nest was blown down 3 times, that bird tried and tried again. And on the 4th try, that bird was successful. Here's a picture of the mama bird sitting on her nest. There were eggs in the nest at that point. That's what perseverance is all about. To persevere means to keep trying to achieve something even when it's difficult or it takes a long time. In our Bible story today, Jacob gets ready to face his biggest challenge yet, and he's going to need perseverance to do so. Let's say our big idea together before we jump into our story. We grow stronger when we persevere. Our Bible story is found in Genesis 32:13-31. And the Bible is the Word of God, and everything in the Bible is true. And God speaks to us through the Bible. So let's listen carefully to what he has to say to us today in this story. Jacob chose to be obedient to God and took all his belongings, flocks, servants, and family and headed back to the land of his ancestors. His father-in-law, Laban, chased him down and tried to stop him from going. But in the end, he sent Jacob and his family off with his blessing. Jacob knew that returning to his homeland meant he would have to face his brother Esau. Jacob had cheated his brother out of his birthright and his father's blessing before he ran off to live with Laban. Esau wanted to kill Jacob, and that's why he left. Now is the time for Jacob to go back and face his brother. Even though it had been 20 years since he had seen his brother, he had no idea if he had forgiven him or if he still wanted to kill him. Jacob was in a scary, hard situation. Jacob and his family set out from an area called the hill country of Gilead toward the land of Edom, where his brother lived. They traveled as far as the Jabbok River. There, Jacob chose a gift for his brother Esau from what he had with him. He chose 200 female goats and 20 male goats. He chose 200 female sheep and 20 male sheep. He chose 30 female camels with their little ones. He chose 40 cows and 10 bulls. And then he chose 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. He put each herd by itself. Then he put his servants in charge of them. He said to his servants, "Go on ahead of me and keep some space between the herds." Jacob spoke to his servant who was leading the way. He said, "My brother Esau will meet you. He'll ask, 'Who is your master? Where are you going? And who owns all these animals in front of you?' Then say to Esau, 'They belong to your servant Jacob. They are a gift to you from him. And Jacob is coming behind us.'" He also spoke to the second and third servants. He told them and all others who followed the herds what to do. He said, "Say the same thing to Esau when you meet him. Make sure you say, 'Your servant Jacob is coming behind us.'" Jacob was thinking, "I'll make peace with him with these gifts I'm sending on ahead. When I see him later, maybe he'll welcome me." So Jacob's gifts went on ahead of him, but he himself spent the night in the camp. That night, Jacob got up. He took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, his 11 sons, and sent them across the Jabbok River. After they had crossed the stream, he sent over everything he owned. So Jacob then was left alone. That same night, a man came to the camp and wrestled with Jacob until morning. The man saw that he couldn't win, so he touched the inside of Jacob's hip. As Jacob wrestled with the man, Jacob's hip was twisted. Then the man said, "Let me go. It's morning." But Jacob replied, "I won't let you go unless you bless me." The man asked, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. Then the man said, "Your name will not be Jacob anymore. Instead, it will be Israel. You have wrestled with God and with people, and you have won." Jacob said, "Please tell me your name." But he replied, "Why do you want to know my name?" Then he blessed Jacob there. So Jacob named that place Peniel. He said, "I saw God face to face, but I am still alive." The sun rose above Jacob as he passed by Peniel. He was limping because of his hip. When Jacob and his twin brother Esau were born, God told their mother Rebekah that Esau would one day serve Jacob. Now, this was unusual since Esau was the older brother, and usually the younger brother would serve the older brother. But this was the beginning of God's promised blessing on Jacob. But it would seem that Jacob didn't trust God to make that happen. So he cheated his brother out of his birthright and father's blessing. This made Esau very angry, and he wanted to kill Jacob. So God sent Jacob to work for Laban. And he worked for Laban for a total of 20 years. Laban was not a kind person to work for, and he cheated Jacob more than once. But through this hard work, God taught Jacob perseverance and to stop relying on himself to make God's blessing happen. Then God told him to go back to his homeland. While he and his family were on the way back to his homeland, we see Jacob's perseverance again when he wrestled with the man until daybreak. Now that man turned out to be God. Jacob refused to tap out, but through perseverance and wrestling God, Jacob fully learned that he needed God and that only God could make his promised blessing happen. God did bless Jacob as he had asked him to, and through that all-night wrestling match, he gave Jacob the strength to face the next challenge, seeing his brother who had wanted to kill him 20 years earlier. Just as God did with Jacob, he uses trials to grow our faith. When we persevere, our faith grow stronger. And the stronger the faith, the greater the challenges we're ready to face. There's no shortcut to growing a strong faith. We need to persevere through hard times to make it happen. We grow strong when we persevere, and just as God did for Jacob, he will give us the strength we need to persevere. So, what trials or slimy situations are you facing right now? Are you wrestling with a tough decision? Or are you going through hard times with your family or friends? Don't give up. Don't tap out. Grab onto God like Jacob did and cling on for dear life. Perseverance builds strength. And if you refuse to quit, God will make you strong. Well, thanks for joining me today at School of the Rock for another slimy episode. I hope you'll come back next week. And remember, to help avoid life's slime, make sure you have God time. Bye for now.